Why is My Hero Academia, a series that is almost a decade old, with over 350 chapters and 5 seasons, so frequently called a new gen series in places like Twitter and forums and Discord servers, among other things? Well, as with everything, there are two sides to this question, a short side and a long side. The short one is probably correct as always, and the longer one is mainly conjecture by me. So let's get to it. The short one is that, well, nobody thought about this naming very much in 2014 and it stuck, even though as those series that were labeled New Generation became the industry giants, became the very foundation of the next generation. But like all simple, easy, and probably correct answers, it's also extremely boring, so I propose a different theory. In my view, MHA represented a shift in the perspective of the audience at the time. To be more specific, the Western audience that existed, and that is why it's called a new gen manga. So let's get right to the thick of it and talk about My Hero. But first, some contextual history. My Hero came out in 2014, which was a time of big changes of the magazine, with Naruto already on its way out and Bleach in the second half of its final arc. The gap in years between One Piece and the next long-running series will become pretty big, almost a decade at that point. And with Gintama later moving on to another magazine for its final chapters, it will become a very gigantic gap. And people, to be more specific, Western people on Twitter were looking for the next thing, the next big battle shonen, hungry for it to manifest itself. And that's the real kicker here, battle shonen. Since they, random Westerners on Twitter, didn't know or care about the rebuild period after both Dragon Ball and Slam Dunk ended, which was actually a very dire time for the magazine. And despite the fact it seemed that history was repeating itself a second time around, it didn't cause nearly as much trouble after Naruto and Bleach ended. But once again, Westerners didn't know the history, and so they were focused on the next Battle Shonen series. Even though series like Haikyuu and Assassination Classroom and Kuroko no Basket were already big hits at the time. They never came up in conversations about New Gen because, simply put, when they came out, both Bleach and Naruto were in the magazine. The Twilight era heralded by then was yet to come. And to be honest, the more important thing was the fact that they were not battle shonen. One, in the case of Haikyuu, was a traditional sports con, and the other, Assassination Classroom, hardly qualifies as a battle shonen. In fact, he would span an entire subgenre that is frankly very interesting on its own. But pushing that aside, people were battle hungry for the next Naruto, the next Bleach, the next One Piece that was going to even surpass One Piece. You know, they wanted a battle manga, not a sports manga. And so, series like Haikyuu and Assassination Classroom ended up being grouped with manga like Death Note and iShield 21, despite being much closer to the release of My Hero than then. Since the thing that caused that division wasn't age, but a change in perception following the end of Naruto and the hiatus of the Bleach anime. And in that context, after Naruto ended and Bleach slipped into more of a Kokochidomi situation, as in a very influential hit, that one that is in its twilight years and not a pillar of the magazine, despite good viewer retention and great sales. In that context, after those two titans slipped away, came along My Hero, by a man that was, frankly, a pretty fucking embarrassing failure at that point. A great artist that failed to materialize Jump Series 2 times before, one that was transparently inspired by the soon-to-be departed Naruto, and who had a Western appeal by being based on superheroes and trying to get that foreign reader base. Something that even the everlasting Titan One Piece took a while to get. And from that perfect storm, with the MCU riding high at the time, on his last possible chance, Horikoshi found an audience, and many began praising him as the herald of a new era of shonen manga. Sure, a lot of the praise was misguided, based on commonly believed misconceptions of My Hero itself and also of other manga, from Naruto to Bleach. But the effect was still very real. My Hero was seen as the first chapter of the new age of shonen in the Western anime community, and thus the herald of a new generation that would learn from the downfall of their predecessor and create a truly peak fighting boys manga, and so on. Again, this is only my perspective as an outsider looking in after the event was already over. I wasn't really there. I was too busy reading Naruto in 2014 to get caught up in My Hero, you know. But as I already pointed out, this happened in part, or at least the part of this that I'm analyzing, happened based on the actions of random people on Twitter. Random people, no less, that didn't understand the history of the magazine, and that while Naruto and Bleach were important to the magazine, they weren't as important when they ended, unlike Slam Dunk and Dragon Ball back in 1996. And even beyond that, there was a lot of Western bias. As I mentioned before, the MCU was riding high, which probably helped too. So, to summarize, Western anime fans didn't really know a lot about the history of the magazine and wanted the next big 15-year series, not understanding changes that happened since then that made such a thing unlikely. Focus on superheroes gave it a new appeal from Western audiences, along with comic book inspired artwork. And Horikoshi, to his credit, understood and had a love for the very series he was trying to capture the audience of, and played with the tropes well, with almost tongue-in-cheek feel at times, playing into the tropes like the arc to rescue a friend that was kidnapped being subverted, for example. Of course, there is also timing, coming in right before Naruto goes away for good, and while Bleach is very much on its way out as well, alongside other factors, made it a focus of the spotlight at the time. And finally, the secret sauce I failed to mention up to this point. The first few seasons of the anime being actually pretty good. A truth that was already in effect here, and even before, with Bleach being another prime example. Something that will become an undeniable fact after Demon Slayer is this: a good anime does wonders for a series' popularity. Something that's so obvious and in your face, it really shouldn't be up for debate or be a revelation at all. But it comes up very infrequently in my experience. Like, the reason people thought Kamino was the peak of My Hero had less to do with the arc itself and more with the fact that it came right after the anime drop, and a lot of people rushed to catch up with the manga and thus experiencing it weekly. And exactly the same thing again happened with Overall, coming right after season 2 dropped and people caught up to the manga. And yet, I never saw anybody correlate these two events at the time. I'm pretty sure I'm the first person to talk about this, which is weird, because such things are very easy to track and very easy to point to. But that would also imply, that the anime community is fickle and doesn't really care about quality and only about hype. But I digress. Regardless, let's not turn this into an impromptu rant. Let's focus and close this out. At least from where I'm standing, these are the reasons MHA was and is to this day called a new gen series. And looking back at the craze while My Hero is in the midst of its final arc, at the time of its writing, it's very interesting. After all, By using it as an example, we can come to some pretty interesting conclusions about the term new gen and the way it's been deployed. This is be applied to series like Tokyo Revengers, who don't even run in Weekly Shonen Jump, where all the context of MHA and its emergence resides. That goes to show just how influential this term has been on the nebulous discourse of Twitter. But stepping back from that, based on this rampant speculation I just made up, we can derive some pretty interesting ideas. One, MHA is one of, if not the, oldest new gen series, and therefore the cutoff point for usage of the term in the West. And number two, the ending of MHA will mark another shift, as people once again come to try and gravitate towards the next big thing. However, things are very, very different from the time of 2014. Gone are the days where the magazine had One Piece and Naruto, and then after that Bleach and Gintama, and then after that Kochikame on the background, all with over a decade in the running, and the oldest series after those was Kuroko no Basket, a little over 5 years old. Now, it's much more spread out, because since Jump almost crashed in 1996, they were trying to diversify, to never be more dependent on one or two series as they were then. And it clearly worked, at least to a degree. Of course, the ending of Naruto and Bleach, both who ran for longer than Slam Dunk and Dragon Ball did at the time of their endings, was a test drive for that idea, to see if Jump could really diversify, to see if they would be able to weather the storm, as it were. And they recovered pretty well from that. But the ending of One Piece will be the biggest test yet. While One Piece will never take the title of longest running manga in Jump, since Kochikame is over 200 volumes and ran for 40 years, and One Piece at a measly 25 years in the running and over 100 volumes is already in its final arc, its final saga. It is the longest a pillar of the magazine has stayed a pillar, not giving way to anything new. Even the mega hits of ages past ran into the backs of the magazine during their final days, from Saint Seiya to Prince of Tennis to Bleach and Katekyo Hitman Reborn. And yet, One Piece refuses to back down from the front pages. And I'm very curious to see if Jump has prepared for that day, the day One Piece finally ends. But let's stop talking about that for now, and talk about the rest of the Jump lineup. Nowadays, aside from one of the series in Jump have been in Jump for over a decade. The oldest is My Hero itself from 2014, clocking in at a solid 8 years. After that, Black Clover from 2015, and then after that, Jujutsu Kaisen from 2018. The top of the magazine, as I said before, is much more disputed than it was in, let's say, 2009 and 2010, both in terms of the table of contents and sales themselves. And now, in this new attention economy, sales, specifically those that don't include global figures, do not correlate so cleanly with popularity anymore. Series like Chainsaw Man will have sold around the same amount as Love Hina or Assassination Classroom in Japan have catapulted themselves into extra relevance on par with the likes of Spy X Family, who outsold Chainsaw Man 2-1 even before an anime in the Western sphere thanks to word of mouth and, of course, memes. And let's not get into how Kimetsu no Yaiba changed the way shonen manga gets adapted with its impact, even outselling One Piece, something that was never done by another Jump manga since Oricon began keeping track it way back in 2008. And then there's of course the upcoming Chainsaw Man anime, who may be the next stage people are looking forward to in the wake of MHA reaching its climax. Done by a popular studio, an adaptation of a very hyped manga with a lot of money going behind it, 12 different endings, etc., so on and so forth. It has even more markers for success than My Hero Academia had, and that's very impressive. Can't wait to see the fallout of that. So whatever comes after MHA is not going to be the same, and frankly, that's for the best. My Hero Academia, despite not being seen as the savior anymore, with a lot of people falling out of it over the years, it's still a well-received and overall very popular manga that was part of, frankly, a much more positive era of Jump in the 2000s, even if it was an era with much more controversy, from the constant breaks due to health issues, from multiple artists, something that was less common before, alongside high profile incidents like the Act Age situation. Or perhaps, maybe it's just the information age bringing to light problems that were always under the surface. I mean, I don't think the Act Age guy would have gone to prison or had his manga cancelled if this was the 1990s or even the early 2000s. But at least, that's my opinion. So, hoping for the best in the future always, and may no Jump manga get stuck with an everlasting anime that doesn't go on breaks ever again. And so, with the hype of the fall 2022 anime season in my heart, I thank you for watching.